Hello and welcome to this fourth Mythconceptions video. Obviously in all these videos we are going to test common misconceptions, interpretations that are debatable or arguable, and look at the arguments for and against and try and draw a conclusion. In this one we're going to focus on the tension between people and nature in Storm on the Island. Now obviously Storm on the Island is one of the most popular poems from the AQA anthology. Very useful in terms of looking at the idea of people, nature, and so on. And the misconceptions we're going to test today are these three, which come up fairly frequently. The first one is that people are powerless. The second one is that the storm in the poem is more powerful than the people. And the third one is that people are somehow being punished by the storm for their arrogance. So let's start with a bit of background to the poem, because it's relevant, I think, to the interpretation. Now, the poem was published in 1966 as part of a wider collection called Death of a Naturalist. Now, on one hand, this poem is about a community on this barren, windswept island who are bracing themselves against the violence of a storm. And it absolutely is about that. However, it can also be read as being about politics. Now, one of the key things, of course, for the title of the poem is this idea that the word island, if you are pronouncing it in a certain way, particularly if someone from Ireland were pronouncing it, then it would also be pretty much the same pronunciation as the word Ireland. So island and island, there's a resonance there from a sound point of view. Now, the timing of the poem is important because it was written and published before really the worst of the Troubles, as that period of political sectarianism, violence, social upheaval, and so on in Ireland came to be known. So actually going too far down the route of this being a political commentary somehow is slightly unhelpful, and certainly to head this one off almost immediately. The interpretation that this is about violence in Ireland doesn't quite make sense in terms of the timing. However, Heaney has hidden the word Stormont in the title, as you can see from the slide here, and he clearly intends the poem to work on several levels. It is meant as a social and political comment. It is meant to be a study of human vulnerability against nature, and it's also, in some ways, a representation of Irish rural identity. So what then are the arguments for those key ideas earlier? That these people are powerless, that the storm is more powerful than them, and that the storm is somehow punishing them for their arrogance. Well, in the poem, the people are made to seem potentially small and fragile. We have the idea of the good slate, the houses being squat. The people sound like they've been reduced, like they're small and helpless, almost animalistic, taking shelter, lurking in the ground somehow. A second idea is that the islands here are exposed. There are no trees, there's no shelter, they seem unprotected. A third point might be about the fact that in the poem we get this language of warfare and of violence. So this semantic field, including words such as bombarded, explode, pummel, strafes. There's a language of warfare here. So it makes sense that on some level those things being associated with nature make nature seem violent and powerful. And the people are scared. As it says in the poem, it's a huge nothing that we fear. The people are made to seem like they're terrified, potentially, of the storm. And then there is this argument that the storm perhaps is attacking these people because they believe themselves to be prepared. Now, this is where this idea of the politics also comes in. So Heaney's writing here in really the early days of the Troubles, before the violence really comes to its kind of its crescendo, to its worst points. So the assumption is that from a political reading, from a political perspective, that Heaney is writing from the point of view of the oppressed, of the repressed, the suppressed, the oppressed Irish population. So that's why people might think those arguments make sense. So what then are the arguments against those ideas? Well, the problem is that on many levels, that interpretation doesn't make complete sense. I mean, after all, the people are prepared. They built their houses to endure. These houses are squat for a really good reason. They've used these strong materials, rock, slate, these are solid things. And they also show a mastery of their environment. And clearly, these people do know what they're doing. They're not sitting there crying quietly among the remnants of their houses and the lives that have been destroyed. These people have been doing this for a while. They've learned. They know what they're doing. A second point is, of course, that the people are both experienced and collectively strong. They stand resiliently against the storm rather than being defeated by it. We are prepared. Our houses troubled us. They're together. Look at the pronouns there. And yes, they ultimately just sit tight. They're not being hurt. They're not being killed. They're not being made destitute. They're just waiting it out. If you just sit tight, you're not really under threat. Notice also that the storm doesn't actually do any damage. It's violent, it seems, but the sea is down on the cliffs and it's exploding comfortably. They're not suffering, they're comfortable with where the sea is. At worst, the storm pummels your house and the flung spray hits the very windows and spits like a tame cat turned savage. So we've got spray on the windows and a pet cat that's turned savage. Now, neither of those images sound life-threatening. I don't think I've ever heard of someone who's been seriously hurt by their pet cat who's turned savage. There's also, in this poem, this dry sense of black humour. The earth has never troubled us with hay, so they don't have to worry about stacks or stalks that can be lost. So yes, they're scared, but they've also still got a sense of humour. There aren't even trees which might prove company. It doesn't sound like people who are scared. It sounds like people who are making do and have retained their sense of, humour. And the ending of the poem then links all of that together. It's a huge nothing that we fear. Now this would then suggest that, yes, nothing is scary because it is. And nothing here could be about death. It could be about the potential for annihilation. But it also means that it's nothing to be scared of. So nothing is scary, but it's also nothing to be scared of. And both those things can be true. And that would of course mean that human imagination, integration, resilience are as powerful, if not more powerful, than the storm. Now to return then to this political angle. It also makes far more sense to interpret the poem this way from the perspective of authorial intention. So rather than Heaney writing a poem that essentially just says, yeah, it's rubbish, God, it's awful, he's actually writing here about the strength and the endurance of the people, offering a positive and affirmative message about their power to collectively endure as a community. And that also makes far more sense politically. So rather than just a depressing poem about how the lives of Irish citizens are being ruined, it's a poem conveying a message of hope. And that fits far more with Heaney's style and his poetry in a broader sense. In Heaney's poetry, we see humanity rooted in the ordinary, connected to nature, conflicted, yes, but capable of transcendence. Heaney was someone who had seen, who lived through, who understood the drag towards destructive impulses. But he always, in his poetry, stressed the human capacity for empathy, for imagination, for forgiveness. And in that reading, that all here seems to fit. So where does that leave us? Well, the first idea here, people are powerless, doesn't really make sense. The people here are prepared. They're strong. They're a community. They're not scared. All the danger and damage is far away. There's a sense of humour. They're not powerless. So that one doesn't make sense at all. Right, the second one, the storm is more powerful than the people. Now this one is debatable. The people are powerful. It could be argued in some ways the storm is more powerful than them. They're not necessarily in conflict with each other, right? But the second one, there's a bit more ambiguity around that. The third idea, the people are being punished by the storm for their arrogance. Now that one again doesn't make sense. The people are powerful, the storm is powerful, the people are enduring, they're not actually scared, they're not being hurt. They're not actually being punished here at all. So that third idea, again, doesn't quite make sense. And there we have it. People and power in Storm on the island. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully it made sense. Either way, thank you very much for your time today, and I will see you in our future videos.